I'm Billy Ryan, and this is the No One Is Watching podcast, where we explore high-performing teams, individuals, and leaders, and dig deep to find out what makes them tick. This show highlights the DNA shared by elite performers, the process by which they leverage that talent, and ultimately helps you apply those lessons to your own life, business, or team. Good to see you, man. I'm excited to catch up today, hear a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about performance code mode. I like what I'm hearing. I like what I see, but I want to hear all the details on how you got into this.
Yeah. So Performance Code is a company that I started in 2022. We are primarily focused on first responders within the tactical strength and conditioning space. So our mission is to provide departments with the health and performance resources and personnel, to better support their employees.
So how'd you get into that space? From transition from sports into first responders? Do you have some ties in your family, or what brought you into that world?
Yeah, a little bit. So I've got a brother-in-law that works in fire, and some close family friends. One that works on the police side, and so kind of just talking with them about, what kind of support services do you guys get when it comes to, anything really health related, whether it's physical training, nutrition, physical therapy, recovery, anything like that. And really what I got back from them was nothing. And so I did a little bit more digging into what resources were available, or, different departments in the area, just trying to get a feel for like where they currently stand, or kind of a status across the Denver metro area here in Colorado. And really what I found was kind of exactly that. Like, there really isn't a whole lot in place. There's a couple outliers for sure. But for the most part, like a really underserved population. And so one of the things that I kind of identified as I was figuring out the next stages of my career was the tactical strength and conditioning space is growing a lot with the military, which is fantastic. But, the other part of that tactical population, which would, be fire, police, EMS, that corrections, even throwing some of those areas in there, there really just wasn't as much support, if any. And so I kind of said, okay, there's an opportunity, there's a gap where, a group of individuals, or a company can come in and help support these people that deserve just as much, care and attention and support as our military counterparts, or, professional athletes. And so that's what really kind of inspired the sector that we decided to pursue. And so far I've been really fortunate to even get an opportunity to work my way into this space. And we've even had been able to experience a little bit of growth as a company. And so that's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. That's great, man. I've talked to a lot of military folks, and parallels between the military and sports are pretty evident, particularly from like a cultural perspective, right? But obviously the physical demands as well. But honestly, I had not thought about first responders. And as soon as you think about it for like a split second, you're like, yeah, of course they need to be, you hear like the stereotypical, guys just working out at the firehouse, when there's nothing going on kind of thing. But that's probably a little bit dated. What's the response been with some of the first responders you're working with? I mean, are they game for this? Are they eyes wide open?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of them, if nothing else, are appreciative of the fact that there's someone providing some kind of guidance, providing that kind of support. A lot of them have, just like, military or professional athletes, some of them have strong opinions as to, the proper way to train, or the proper way to do things, or, maybe a little bit kind of set in their ways. But, ultimately what's a little bit different, I guess, working with this population as opposed to, professional athletes, is that, like, really all I care about is that they're doing something to take care of themselves. Like, the biggest conversation and the biggest, I guess, hurdle that I run into is when we're talking with some people that may have some strong opinions about training is just those are usually the guys that are redlining a little bit too much. And so it's like, hey, I love your enthusiasm. I love that, you're into this as much as I am. Let's find a way to get a little bit more strategic about where and when to kind of, throttle down a little bit and when we need to ease off so that you can make sure that everything else, from a recovery and perspective is in line. So a lot of them have adopted the program. We send out training guidance to all of our full-time personnel, both police and fire. So we're a little, it changes every year with people leaving and adding people through the academy, but we kind of hover, at least right now, somewhere around about 1,200 first responders in the city that I'm contracted with full-time. And so everybody gets access to a program that I do my best to tailor to their profession and what I think is appropriate or important to train. And the reception's been good. One of the other things that we've really been pushing and again, kind of bringing what I know from the previous part of my career in sports world is really just trying to recreate that same human performance, sports medicine, whatever you want to call it, model to the fire service. And so and the police service. And so what we've done is starting to implement what we call our return to duty program. And so that's, our injured individuals, making sure that they are getting appropriate, again, care and guidance as they go through the process. Because what I identified up until that point was like, it was, sometimes you go to the work comp doc and they're just like, yeah, whatever, you're cleared. And, this person just had back surgery, 85 days ago, but they got within the 90-day window. And so, okay, they're clear to go back. No one's checked to see if they can, do this skill or this skill. It's just like, wow, that is an incredible risk to take.
Well, yeah, we used to talk about that in sports and you think about the downside there versus the downside of, somebody in a burning building and their back goes out again. I mean, the consequences are pretty significant.
Yeah, absolutely. And so and so as I've gotten, I guess deeper and deeper into this, or learning about this profession, just like all that goes into it, like it becomes very clear, like how needed this stuff is. Like for our firefighters, if you're thinking about, here, the city that I work with, they run a 24-48 schedule, meaning they're on for 24 hours and then off for 48. Most or a lot of departments run 48-96. But if you think about, depending on, the station they're at, some are busier, some are slower, of course. But if they're running multiple calls throughout the day, throughout the night, yes, maybe they do get an opportunity to get a little workout in here or there, but the weight rooms I equate it a lot to like my time in minor league baseball. Like some facilities are great, some are like broom closets, and you're like, okay, I got a mixed match of kettlebells and bumper plates and whatever, and you do the best you can. But these guys are putting on gear, both police and fire. Could be carrying or wearing a vest for our police officers, their duty belt. That affects their kind of their biomechanics when it comes to just sitting in the car, working on their computer, running calls, and then having the potential to have to go from, essentially, 0 to 100 within seconds of getting amped up, ready to go, be mentally focused, mentally alert, and also physically prepared, to run into that, that call where, maybe there actually is a structure fire, or maybe there's an active shooter. Being able to be physically ready and mentally ready to go respond to that is a huge amount of stress. And it's not something that we take lightly. And that's why we want to make sure that, we're pushing the envelope and exploring everything we can to get these people the things that they need.
What is I imagine a lot of the focus, guys, pre-performance code, right? People were doing whatever they whatever they needed to do to get prepared and get ready. The people that were more fitness oriented did their routines. Some probably did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine that they all had some form of recovery, right? Whether that was formal or just crashing on the couch and laying motionless for a couple hours. Like that has got to be, particularly guys that are pulling hours like that in shifts where the bell could ring at any time and you got to go and you got to have your A game. You know, what have you seen in the recovery space of that specifically?
Not enough. Yeah, I think honestly, that's probably more of a challenge than anything else, is how do we make sure that we're recovering appropriately so that these individuals can go back to family life, can seamlessly transition back into their, their non first responder, work, and be able to mix in, back into, if you have kids, okay, helping out with taking them to school and practice for sports or whatever else is going on. And I think that's a really big challenge. And that's why we've seen such a rise in, unfortunate events, with individuals struggling from a mental health perspective. And I think the population as a whole has done a much better job, it seems, over the last 10 or maybe even 15, 20 years of addressing the mental health side of things. Of course, I'm biased, but my argument is like, that's fantastic and it's absolutely needed. But the other side of that sword or that coin is your physical health, right? You can't fully have one without the other. So you could be an athletic specimen, but if, upstairs you're battling a lot of things and you're having a hard time with that, it's going to eventually creep into how you perform physically and vice versa, right? So we've been working on exploring, or at least I have, exploring some different things from like a sleep stress management and recovery perspective of like, okay, we all know kind of the hacks, or we all kind of know what we should be doing, or at least have a decent idea. Is just a matter of like, how do we create those habits that turn into actions that actually elicit, the effect that we're after. And I think that's really what people struggle with. I equate it a lot to like nutrition, right? Like we can get really in the weeds and super complicated, and that stuff is really, really interesting. But ultimately, like, what do we need to do? Okay, we know we probably need to eat more fruits and vegetables so we get our fiber, make sure we have enough carbohydrates and enough proteins. And like, that's of course a very overly simplistic view of it, but it's the same thing with like sleep and recovery. Like, okay, we need to try to aim for, 6 to 8 hours. Okay, in order to do that, do I have a routine that I go through in order to get prepared for that? And so, yeah, I think the recovery side of things is one of the more challenging things. But the more that we talk about it and the more that we start getting them actually thinking about it is really key, so that they're not just, getting off shift, struggling to get back onto their cycle with, the rest of life, and hopefully decrease the amount of, alcohol consumption or caffeine consumption on the other end of just trying to stay awake and try and get back into it. Like, it's definitely something that, my heart goes out to them, because I can only imagine. I try to put myself in their shoes and be like, man, like, yeah, if I was working graveyard shift as a police officer where, I'm working all night, 4 days in a row. And then for the other 3 days, I got to shift back in to help out with, again, whatever my family situation is, or, social situation is. That's a lot to undertake, on top of just the inherent stress that comes along with actually doing the job itself. It's
a great point, man. And honestly, I hadn't thought about it in those terms. I've had a lot of conversations with military folks, and those that come down, that transition out of the military, right? That's a big challenge and an adjustment, but that's a much longer period of time, right? You're either, you're retiring from the military, or you're not enlisted, or whatever it may be. it's not like Tuesday to Wednesday, like it might be for a police officer or a fireman. And you're right. I mean, you've got to be, I mean, it's life and death for you and a whole bunch of other people, you know, when you're on duty, and then you got to go home, you got to be dad or husband or whatever, and live your life. And to have that discipline and that routine, not to just, all right, I'm going to go have a couple beers to unwind and I'm going to, you know, sleep when I sleep and eat what I eat kind of thing. How much of that is, are you able to kind of make headway on that on your front? I imagine it's a challenge because that's, you know, that's like, hey man, I'm off duty, leave me alone kind of thing. Like it's like the preventative piece of that rather than like the, hey, let's get some extra strength training in, you know?
Yeah. It's all about education, right? That's not my space. I want to provide resources, but as, you know, primarily a strength and conditioning coach, I try to, you know, kind of stay within my wheelhouse and resource out to the professionals in any particular area. So really what we work on and what our officers are fortunate enough to have is that there are psychological services that they get access to without any kind of, you know, payment or charge of any kind. So it's, you know, it's provided to them. And, you know, the hope is that if, you know, if you run and again, these people experience the worst side of humanity a lot of times. Right.
Yeah.
And taking that on from a psychological perspective, and then, you know, say you, and not to get too super graphic, but say you run into a call where, you know, a young child dies and you happen to have young children and you get off shift and you have to go back to your house. Like that can do a lot of damage, right? That can
Sure.
absolutely, like, I know it would for me. I don't know. I honestly can't say that I could handle that. I don't know.
Yeah. Ditto.
So again, immense amount of respect for the people that I work with, but, you know, hopefully that, you know, if they're really struggling with something or come across something like that, you know, they have services in place here where they can go talk to, you know, obviously a licensed professional to handle those things. From my end, I look at it more from a performance perspective of like, yeah, okay, like from more of a holistic view is like, okay, if we have our, you know, our psych services here, we're putting out, you know, nutrition information that our registered dietitians that are familiar with the tactical space are providing, you know, 10-minute monthly videos, or we're hosting workshops to learn. And then from my perspective, from a physical training, okay, more education, more support, more guidance, direct guidance. And hopefully, you know, across the board or kind of along all of those things is that, you know, we're doing the best we can to get them any kind of support that they need. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge because it's not something that I can, you know, reach out to them, especially because the way we're currently set up is I'm one person. And there's, like I said, we're about 1,200 plus. So
Yeah.
I'm 2 years in a full-time capacity. And there are still individuals that, you know, don't know I exist, or we haven't met yet because we just haven't crossed paths. Like we're a big city. And so it's kind of a slow burn, unfortunately, because I'm an impatient person. I want to get everything out there. I want to do everything for everybody. And, you know, hopefully down the road, we're able to continue to build, add more, you know, staff in our space out here, and so that we can continue to grow this thing. But yeah, it's super important work.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I imagine there's some positive peer pressure that happens too. That, you know, I'm ignorant to that world. I don't know what the environment's like. But you know, like if you're surrounding yourself with people that are taking their health and their wellness and their strength and conditioning and their lifestyle seriously, it's, you know, probably a good thing for you. It's going to rub off on you a little bit. But yeah, it's so that spike, right? The peak and valley on a day-to-day basis. I hadn't really considered it in those terms, what those folks go through. And I mean, just on a much smaller scale, right? Like I feel it when I'm not physically at my best. Like you're not as good elsewhere in your life. You know, you're just not present. And I'm not going through the, sort of acute, intense stress on probably a daily basis that those people are. So I think it's incredible that you're laying that foundation for them. What's been the response? I mean, I think you're getting back into your former life in baseball. I can absolutely see the parallels between that and minor league baseball as far as facilities, as far as you're probably encountering people that are coming from all walks of life and in all sort of all elements of background as far as strength conditioning, nutrition, et cetera, right? People that have probably really on top of it and some people that don't do anything and are in horrible shape to some degree. Have there been parallels for you with your experience, particularly at like the lower levels of the minor leagues, and sort of ingratiating, young athletes into professional baseball? I mean, has there been some levers that you've been able to pull from those days?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I get that question a lot too, especially from colleagues in the strength and conditioning space, where it's like, yeah, man, it's just like any team you've worked with, if you've been, I call it kind of like the clubhouse mentality, or, the clubhouse environment. Like, it's very much the same, which I enjoy. Like, that's something that I personally feed off of, and that, I like that side of things. And, from a physical perspective of bringing people on, there's just tons of parallels as far as like, what we need to focus on. The difference, I think, for me, is like when we talk about the academy in particular, like those are individuals that are, pursuing this career. Some may have, varied levels of experience, depending on where they're coming from and what they did prior. But it's been a really interesting kind of case study, I guess, if you will, and almost kind of like a litmus test of like the state of our nation, I guess, from a physical perspective. Like, and not to try to embarrass anyone or downplay anything, but like the general even health, or for lack of better words, athleticism or coordination that we're seeing of these recruits, that as they're coming in, a little bit different than like in the baseball world, we're like, okay, like, someone got drafted and came to us. We know that at least they've been playing baseball, right? Hopefully some other sports as well. And like, they're going to be, have certain level of athleticism and coordination. The difference here is that like, this is truly Gen Pop. Like, this is our general population that have now chosen a profession that is very physically demanding. And a lot of times I think there's a pretty big disconnect between expectations and reality of like how physical this job can be, or how physical you need to be or stay in order to handle that once in a career call. Right. And that's a message that we preach a lot to our recruits, is like, I always tell them, train as if that career call is coming next week or next year or whatever it is, to stay on top of your game. But our training when it comes to the academy is honestly pretty general, because it has to be, because I'm teaching a lot of these people just very basic stuff. And
so is this part of the academy, what you're doing, or is this after they get out?
No, so they train with me during the academy. So what we do, like, we'll provide a program for them 8 weeks in advance. So hopefully they do it, and like that, hopefully mitigates some of the risk and the challenges, and just getting, familiar with some of these things.
Off-season workout plan before spring training. Right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Again, another similarity, but so, and kind of like spring training, as we always say, like, if you wait for the academy to get into shape, just like if you wait until spring training to get into shape, it is too late. Doesn't mean you can't be successful, but it's just an additional stress that like they don't need. Like, they're studying, they're learning, there's a lot of pressure, and so it's like, hey, like, make sure your physical health and the physical side of things is locked in. So that's just one thing that you can kind of put out of your mind. But definitely some similarities in that regard, where, with our younger athletes, when they would come through, like, especially from like the Latin, countries, would be like, okay, like, we really need to reel it back to like super, super foundational basic stuff. Teach them that first. And honestly,
Yeah.
that helps them a ton. And it's the same thing here with our academies is that, we really have to start basically at the, the 101 level, and then work them up. When it comes to our sworn personnel, yeah, I mean, it's a mixed bag. Like there's always going to be those individuals that no matter what we do, they're always just going to kind of, brush it off and be like, whatever. Then there's the high performers that I don't have to worry about because they're into it. They care. They see the value. With them, it's more about how do we get more finite with our processes, which I would equate a lot to like say more the major league level where it's like, hey, they're kind of polished. They get it. They know how to take care of themselves pretty well. We're just fine tuning things a little bit to make sure that we stay there. And then the middle ground, if I was going to make a comparison would be, your low A to maybe even triple A. Like, okay, how do we continue once we have the foundation, how do we continue to, move the needle a little bit and basically get them to the point where they almost don't need us, right? Where it's like, okay, like they know how to take care of themselves. So when they're on shift, they have a plan for, okay, I'm going to try and get a workout in, but I'm going to make it, super short, maybe higher intensity, but I'm going to keep it short and sweet, almost like a primer. So I'm ready to go and I'm not too sore or too fatigued to run a call if the tones drop in the middle of the workout or an hour later or 2 hours later or the middle of the night. So that's kind of how I approach it. But yeah, I think a lot of us in the professional sports realm are interested in the tactical space, and because from a personal perspective, there's a lot of benefit, like weekends off, 40-hour a week cap, sort of thing.
Right.
Like,
Right.
so there's that, but it's also like, it's very, kind of adjacent or like parallel to that profession where it's like, you're still kind of getting that same environment that I think a lot of us thrive in or thrive off of. And also feeling like you're really making an impact. Because that's what we all want to do as coaches, right? Is like our job is to help someone else. And that's what we're after.
Hey, real quick. If you're getting value from the show, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. And if you're so inclined, go ahead and leave a 5-star review while you're at it. It helps more people like you find this podcast. And honestly, that simple form of support, it makes a difference. All right, back to the conversation. Right. I want to talk a little bit more about the high performing piece of that because we've seen it, or I've seen it, right? And you've seen it as well with athletes. And when you find those high performers in your organization, whether they're major leaguers or not, or major leaguers or maybe not quite yet major leaguers, those people who get it, that are on top of their stuff, that absorb what you can offer, and to your point, sometimes it's a little bit more sharpening of those skills than building the foundational elements of it because they're already sort of down that road a little bit. But the impact those people can have on your organization, because they are in it every day, and just the lead by example that they provide. Talk to me a little bit more about what that's been like in either sector for you, like back in your sports days or now, those leaders who do it because everybody looks around and they're like, well, if it hits the fan, I'm going to that guy because he's on top of it, right? Like, what is that? Have you seen a ripple effect in the space you're in now, comparable to sports?
Yes. We start talking about like kind of more of like from a cultural perspective of, and I'll stick to, physical health and or fitness in particular. Those high performers, the way that I kind of view them now, and maybe I didn't as much in professional sports and maybe should have, or maybe I did kind of inherently, was those are like your ambassadors for the program, right? So on this side of things, if we have a crew, or on the fire side, if we have a crew that's like really, really just like into fitness. Like they're bringing their own equipment into the stations. Like they train as a crew together. They have a plan. Again, sometimes those are the ones I got to reel in a little bit. But I would far much rather do that than be like begging, like, please just do this one thing or do that.
Right.
And you had that in sports too. Like sometimes there's just some athletes is like, you try every angle and every strategy, everything you've read from every leadership book. And you're just like, nothing is
none of this works. Yeah.
But so I try to lean into either those groups or those individuals. So that, if we have an officer that's like, super into it, especially if they are in more of a leadership type position, can we lean on those people to help kind of push the message and some of the things that we're doing? What's been really cool now is that on both sides of public safety, individuals that have either been stationed, for lack of better words, out here at the training center, or have just worked with me enough, they are the ones where like, hey, so-and-so, was asking some questions. So I told him to reach out to you. Or I'll get, a cold call essentially, or, an email from someone saying, hey, I was talking to so-and-so about some fitness related stuff. And they said I should reach out to you. Can we set up a time to talk? And so it's cool to finally get to that point where it's like, this is where, things can really take off from, because now people are kind of spreading the message. And so, and that's kind of, and not that it was terrible here, but like when we talk about going from literally nothing to trying to, kind of right the ship and get all these supports in place and getting people to buy in and start to be a part of this movement, I guess, for lack of better words. Like we need those people, even if they're not, and I don't expect anyone to follow, what I'm recommending, to a T 100%, just like in professional sports. Like they go off to back home in the off season, they got their guy. That's cool. Like, let's just make sure that we're at least communicating to a certain degree about what you were doing, so we're all on the same page and we're making sure that you're getting what you need.
Yeah. That always takes time, right? So it's a challenge. You got to build that credibility. Once you start getting those referrals, right, then you're right. Yeah, you're running downhill a little bit more. But we've both been in places where you've got your heart's in the right place. You've got a lot of conviction in the strategy being the right thing to do, but you also know that people have to see it for themselves. So you're in this like trial period. You're auditioning, and that can take. It can take weeks. It can take months. Sometimes it can take years, right? To get the skeptics sort of on your side of the ledger. That can be challenging. Have you seen that? I mean, particularly when you're building out something new, right? Some people are like, I don't want anything to do with this. Others are like, I don't see the value. And again, others are going to be all in. So how have you navigated that sort of the building from 0 to 1 and the reluctance that some folks have maybe shown?
Yeah. And I think it has given me a lot of appreciation for the things that I was learning in my own development as I was going through, the different levels of baseball and different organizations and different levels of responsibility, is that I was learning how to be really efficient with those interactions. So when it comes to, my company now, and to your point, like kind of getting people on board, I've really had to focus on, or trying to be, really aware of the fact that every interaction that I have is important, and I need to have a beneficial interaction. Sometimes that's having a hard conversation. Sometimes that's really, just kind of, talking shop or talking crap, in the weight room, and like making that personal connection, right? Where it's like, because it's all voluntary. That's the difference here, is like, I'm just here to help, take it or leave it. And so I am trying to, advocate for people to take it, Like, please come talk to me. If you have something going on, like, I want to know, I want to help. Like, I'm here for you. That's what it's about. And so I think what baseball, or my time in baseball, really helped me do is I feel like, and I'm not perfect, and there's certainly always room for growth, of course, but I feel like I've gotten pretty good at recognizing where people are coming from, just in body language and tone and how they're interacting. Like, you can know pretty quick, like, this person's open, or this person's going to take a little bit more convincing. So maybe I don't, maybe it's more of a conversation approach where, hey, what do you think about this? Or what do you think, let them be a part of it, as opposed to
Right.
the people who are like, hey, just tell me what to do. I need some help. And so being able to identify those things really fast, or being able to identify those that may even have a little bit of resistance, like when it comes to our return to duty program, like I mentioned earlier, some of them aren't thrilled about having to come to see me once a week. One, because our location here isn't ideal, but like, they just want to get back online. It's like,
Yeah.
I get that. Like, I want that for you too, but we need to be smart about how we do this so that you don't, end up with, a
Yeah.
reoccurring injury. And now we're set back even worse, or even further or longer, or what have you. And so,
Right.
I feel it. And so there's that side of the things. And you could even take this into interactions with, like, department leadership, which I would correlate to, like, front office staff. So people that are key stakeholders and have a lot of influence in where the program goes or what it does, but they don't actually work in the field. So they don't know kind of the X's and O's or the nitty gritty stuff. And so, can you effectively communicate or convey what you're after, be really precise with it, so you're not wasting their time, but also get them on board and for them to buy in order to support the things that you're trying to do. And so, yeah, I feel very fortunate that I got a lot of that, I mean, thousands and thousands of reps over the 13 years that I was in that space. Of working with different scenarios like that, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, like, can I change my tune, so to speak, or my approach, or how I interact with people like that? I could have
Yeah.
3 different people in the gym training at one time on different programs or the same program or whatever, but I have to interact with all 3 of them differently because they kind of operate a little bit differently. So yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I just had a chat with a buddy the other day. He was a former college football coach, and he's no longer in the industry. And he was interviewing years ago for a sales job, and they're like, "You don't have any sales experience."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "I recruited for Division I football.
I
Like,
sold all day."
yeah, like all I did was sell, and so there's all of this, like, put your corporate hat on now. And I've experienced this myself as I've transitioned out of sports every day. Is there's all of these sort of resume buzzwords and corporate skills that you can put down or put in your toolbox, that it may just take some explaining for people to understand, like stakeholder management. You're in your role, you've got to deal with the front office, you've got to deal with the players, you've got to deal with the coaching staff, you've got to deal with, probably to a lesser extent, but sort of secondarily, agents, right? And that influence, and the people back home, whatever influence their guys, right? Their strength and conditioning guy may have. Like, there's all of these things that you have to sort of navigate. That's just to relationship build, and you've got to do that, to your point, 1,000 times, right? Like every season, you've got to do that 1,000 times. So
Yeah.
there's all these skills that translate, and when it comes to dealing with high performers, and look, high performers, or high potential performers, because right, you've encountered a million guys that you just know that they're not scratching the surface of their potential, and it's because of any number of reasons. And so you then got to figure out a way to crack that nut and say, okay, like, let me help you. And the psychology of, right, do I have to hit this guy over the head? Do I have to let him come to me? Do I have to get his buddy to buy in first? Right? There's all of this stuff. And so I was chuckling. We were having beers the other night, and he's like, dude, I have sold for 15 years. And you're going to tell me I can't go sell your product because, it's like, I went into the rich suburbs and sold that family on my program, and I went into the underserved areas and I sold the program just the same, and I was effective in both spaces. Like there's a lot there. If you were to make a hard pivot tomorrow and get into a totally different field, that I'm a firm believer is widely applicable. If you can just help the people that have maybe never lived that life understand that.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you've got a decent amount of experience as a coach in any area, yeah, you can sell.
You can sell, right?
Yeah, as long and I've actually there's been a number of former coworkers that have left the strength and conditioning space and got into things like medical sales and stuff like that, and from what I can tell, have been very successful in doing that, and that checks out. Like that makes sense to me because it's like, yeah, like our entire profession as coaches involves interacting with other people. That's what we do. And so the deeper you get into that, especially if you're the type of person that's, kind of, reading into different areas in order to get better at those things from your own personal development, then you can't help but, become more efficient at the way that you're able to connect, communicate, educate, all those things. And that can be applied to a number of other professions as well.
Sure. Pulling that thread a little bit more, do you have any mentors, from the beginning of your baseball career to now that have maybe helped you develop some of those skills that, there's a lot of really tactically excellent practitioners out there, right? In the sports space and elsewhere. But if they don't have those soft skills, if they can't connect with somebody, it's useless. I mean, you may as well be a textbook, right? So like, have you, as you've evolved through your career, have you had some people that have helped you in that area specifically?
Yeah. I mean, I could run through a list of names for people that have heavily influenced my development, and I feel very fortunate in that the organizations that I worked with as I was, a young, 23, 24-year-old, just trying to find my way in, the adult world. The entire Diamondback staff, like from day one, there was almost more of a emphasis on that side of development than there was on actual developing as a strength and conditioning coach, whether that's right or wrong or, what have you. Like there was a ton of emphasis on that. And I think that helped. And I think it took some time for a lot of those concepts to come around. And then when I moved over to the Atlanta Braves, one of the reasons that I, accepted the offer to move over there was because I knew that those individuals were of the same mindset. And I know you have Brad on the podcast, and like he was, him and Jordan and everybody else. Like again, I could give you a long list of names of people that deserve a ton of credit. From Nate Shaw.
Is that something that you were cognizant of at the time? Like I need to develop this. I mean, you're a young kid, you probably don't know any better, you're just trying to learn everything, right? But did you get to the point where you're like, I feel pretty good tactically and I got to work over here, or did it happen more organically than that?
Yeah, no, I was very aware of it. And I think this could be said for most strength and conditioning coaches. Like, I think I was the most sharp and I was like the most intelligent from like a strength and conditioning perspective when I was in my early, mid, maybe even late 20s, like, because that was my main focus. And then as I, my career aspirations, the window, or the vision got bigger. It was like, okay, that's pretty solid. How do I get to the next level? And thankfully I had started, kind of chipping away at it even before that point, but very much aware of like, okay, and thankfully a lot of those organizations we did, peer reviews and end of year performance reviews. So like it was hard to hear a lot of times. Yeah. But like you were very aware of at least what the people you work with thought of you from a number of different areas. And so it's like, okay, if one person says it, if the entire team is saying, basically the same thing, all right, you should probably pay attention to that. And so like
Yeah.
if it was one of those things, it's like, okay, how do I get better at that? How do I lean into that? Whether it's just talking to people that are already in that role, or reading books, or going to workshops, whatever it is. But I was very aware of that, of like, I need to work on this side of things. And thankfully, again, kind of bringing it back to performance code now, is like, I didn't know that I was going to start this company. My departure from baseball happened. I had to walk away unexpectedly. And I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? And I'm so thankful that like I had those experiences, because I truly believe it's what allowed me, to kind of get a foot in the door, and eventually, turn this into something that's, been a certain level of success. And so, yeah, very much aware of the things that I needed to work on, and was very intentful about how do I get better at some of these things. And yeah, and then the other part is just like, you just have to get reps, you have to get experience, and you're going to make mistakes. And like, okay, like after an interaction, like, I wish I hadn't said that, or could I have explained that in a slightly different way, that, either for that people or the group of individuals. And I still screw up. I still make mistakes today. If I have a group of 35 to sometimes 50 recruits, they're not all the same learning styles. They're not all
Right.
enthusiastic about, like, so how do I, as one person, how do I make sure that I am, staying professional, communicating, also showing a little bit of personality, having some fun, right? Like, how do I get them to essentially, be a part of what we're trying to do? And so, yeah, it was a very much a cognizant effort on at least for me, on my part.
Well, it speaks to the power of the environment that you're in. It would be very easy, I imagine. I mean, even in the world that I was in, and we intersected at multiple organizations, but it's very easy to just head down, block the guy in front of you, and just be excellent. Right, to your point about in your 20s, like, just I am the subject matter expert here.
Right.
And then there's this whole worldview beyond that. That, to your point, eventually, if you do want to do anything different, you can just stay, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are people that are just an inch wide, a mile deep, are incredibly valuable, in the right roles, and can be an absolute difference maker. But if you are inclined to do something else or grow in a different way, there's all this other stuff that you got to figure out. You don't have to be excellent at all of it. But you were in an organization, and so was I, that it was intentional. It was purposeful. And you were surrounded with people that took it seriously. And we did the same thing in the front office. We would do the peer reviews, and everybody's on board with it before it happens. Right. And you say, yeah, this sounds good. No, tell me what you think. And then you get that feedback. You're like, I didn't like that.
Yeah.
It's like, it's humbling. It's humbling. But I'm sure that you can lose people that way too. Right? People that say they want to hear it, and then they hear it and they're like, screw this, I'm going to go somewhere else. These people don't like me, or they don't respect me, or I'm not a fit here. And most people in that, the environment you're referring to, I imagine took it as okay, I got it. Like, lick your wounds and get over your ego a little bit. And then you say, I got some work to do. That's fine. I'll figure it out. And I'm around people that can help me get better in these areas. That's the thing I've always really enjoyed. And I've been fortunate to be around staffs in your space, in your area of expertise, that have been very growth oriented and very humble and very sort of service, servant leader oriented, and in everything they do. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And I think players feed off of that, and organizations get better because of it, because that's how you get the buy-in. You realize you're not there to sell a book, or like, get your name out there. You're out there to help people get better. And there's a million different ways you can do that.
Yeah, I think especially in the, and I always said, or at least I tried to convey this to some of our younger coaches a lot of times when I was, essentially, supervising a staff of, 6 to 7 coaches, is like, exactly your point. Like, you don't have to have an aspiration to be a head major league strength coach or NFL, whatever your sport of choice is, right? um, you can be very good in the role that you're at and be super valuable. However, most of us, I would say probably 90% or even higher want that, that title, that role, like that's what we're seeking, but don't really always realize when we're young everything that goes into it. And so it's
Sure.
helping. And the only reason that I got pushed into some of that stuff is because someone, basically hit me over the head and said, "Hey, dummy, you got to work on this and this and this." And I'm like, oh, okay. Because you don't know what you don't know until someone
Yep.
tells you what you don't know.
Right.
And so I was fortunate enough to have a lot of really good mentors and leaders that did that for me. Again, yeah, lick your wounds for sure at first, but then like the differentiator is the people that go, okay, yes, I'm going to lean into that, or maybe a little bit defensive and say that's not for me. And then usually those people kind of wash out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not a knock on them personally. It's just that's the nature of the beast. Like that's the profession. Like if you really want to be at the top, you got to recognize all that goes into it and all that is required. Like you can look at someone's program and be like, well, what makes them so great? That's not what makes them great. What makes
Yeah.
them really good, and especially ones that have been in those positions, or positions like the ones you held for so long, is like you don't stick in those roles for more than 2-3 years unless you're really good at all of kind of the X factor stuff. So if you've got a strength coach that's been in a certain role at the highest level for a decade or more, like figure out what makes them tick outside.
Mm-hmm.
Like forget the actual day to day. The words escaping me, but what are the intangibles that they have that really set them apart? And I think that was a huge shift in my own development and trajectory.
And it's just a totally different skill set, and it's hard there are some young, uber talented people. And we would always try to do it. I know you were places that did the same. You try to hire people that are way better than you are in certain areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then just put them in a position and develop them and see where it goes. But to lead a team and to manage a group, right, is a very different skill set. And it's not, to your point, it's not a knock on anybody. If you don't want to or aren't equipped to do that, you can still be incredibly valuable and incredibly successful. But yeah, you've got to broaden out that worldview to understand what that entails. I think the same applies to business. I mean, there are serial entrepreneurs and people that have been CEOs at multiple companies across diverse industries. They're not subject matter experts in all of those spaces, right? They're good
Couldn't
leaders,
possibly, right?
right? But they have the requisite skill set of being able to probably lead, communicate, set a process, establish it, empower people, all this stuff that is applicable all over the world, and then no matter what you're doing. And that's the stuff when you're young, you don't appreciate, you don't realize that's even a thing. You're just like, well, if I'm the best strength and conditioning coach, I will eventually be the major league strength and conditioning coach, right? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's not exactly how that works.
Yeah. It's just like you said, it's maturity, it's development. And again, it's not a knock or saying anyone's immature in a bad way. It's just like you just have to get your feet wet, get under you, gain some experience. And yeah, in any level of business, like even if you end up in a different area or a different sector or whatever, selling a different product or leading a different company that's completely different, like there's once you kind of get, I guess, to like that level, so to speak, like you start to see the similarities. Of course, there's differences in the actual, the product or the service that's provided, but like it's almost, there's so much that's the same. And it's just like, okay, how do I just kind of fine tune this or make it a little bit different in order to make this
Make
applicable
it
to
mine.
the
Yeah.
area, to make it mine or to make it this company's?
Yeah. And my bias is always you look to sports to sort of make those analogies because it's the world I lived in and it's relatable. And in my former life, you look at either coaches or executives who have these really extensive trees, of coaches or executives throughout the league or throughout sports. And then you have others who are incredibly successful themselves, but there is no tree, right? Nobody's ever really left and gone and done anything. And that's always fascinated me, is the one that is successful at doing that. Is that intentional? right? Are they trying to develop those people so they can go on and go do things, or is it more organic in that that is their leadership style? That is how they, it's more collaborative in the way that they execute and lead, as opposed to the one I think about is, I wrote about it recently, is Bill Belichick and Nick Saban. Right? Saban's tree of coaches, I mean, it's all over, not just college football, it's all over the sport, right? There's guys up and down the NFL that have worked with him or for him at some point. And then you look at Bill Belichick, who, that you can make the argument that they're both the best to ever have done it in their respective spaces. And plenty of guys left New England and went and got opportunities, but very few, if any, were successful as head coaches. And is that a knock on them, or is it a knock on him, or is it not a knock at all? But it's that ability to like sort of leave the nest. What's going to happen next? What have you taken with you, and what can you make your own? Versus just copy and paste. Right, to your point, I'm going to take you this guy's program, and I'm going to bring it over here, and we're just going to be just as good as they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and you see it when you hire people too, right? People are poaching front offices and coaches all the time because they're trying to steal a little of this secret sauce over here, and I'm going to bring it over to our place, and it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, it's hard to really know if like that individual was a key player in that, or if they were just kind of, this is probably a poor way of putting it, but like a cog in the machine, right?
Yeah.
If you pick the wrong one, you pick the wrong one and bring them over, and then they're a dud, and you're like, okay, that was a mistake. And I think we have to be careful with that too. And that probably happens a lot, obviously in the sports world where it's like, but I've seen some of it in the at least in the first responder space too, when it comes to like maybe not policy, but like a super simple example would be like in annual fitness testing. A lot of times departments will call other departments and be like, well, what are you guys doing? And what's cool about it is that it's a very tight-knit community. In fact, our business has benefited from that and grown a little bit because of word of mouth and departments talking to each other. But also a lot of times it's just like, well, if there's no, again, in my area, if there's no subject matter expert in place, you've got people that don't work in the space that are talking to other people that don't work in the space going, well, what do you guys do? And they go, okay, well, I don't have the time or, the energy to dig into this. It's not my area. I'm a division chief or a commander or whatever. And so yeah, we'll just copy and paste that and adopt it because that's what someone else does. And we can kind of lean on the work that was done over there. Just an interesting observation of, how things kind of operate or the status quo up until this point. And I really do believe that like in our area, like first responders are kind of like the final frontier, if you will, of like where we get embedded in and work with it and the benefits of all that. Like I've said this on other, to people all the time is like professional sports set, college sports set, high school programs look like D1 programs now. Like people are going to, private training facilities with their 8-year-old kid, all those areas are set. The military, like I mentioned, is growing like crazy. What's the last one left? It's first responders. There's very few groups doing it out there. And I think the early adopters are going to be the ones that are going to reap the most benefits. And then hopefully we have good people in place so that when those other departments do come around and go, hey, what are you doing? They're like, well, we invest in our people by investing in this individual or this company or whatever the situation may be. Like we have subject matter experts that guide this area for us because it means that much to us.
Well, it's going to be really interesting to see that evolution with AI, because it's going to be very easy to just sort of copy and paste programming if that's what you want to do. But I think we're missing the mark if we do that. To your point, it's got to be, there's that human element that we're never going to be able to take away. And having, and this is similar, I go back 10 years and I thought this about sort of front offices in baseball. It's like eventually we're going to get to the point where access to data and access to analytics it's going to be the same. Everybody's going to have the same, information at the hand. And I just saw that MLB took a step to sort of standardize that across all leagues or across all teams. So we're there, right, in sports. But the separator is who can what can you do with that information? Right? How do you synthesize it? How do you make it relatable and adaptable? And how do you get it into the people's hands that are ultimately going to need to use it, which is the players, right? If you can, you're given some diatribe and you're writing a thesis on this really advanced metric, and you got some 23-year-old kid looking at you cross-eyed, like, what are you talking about? Like, all you're trying to do is prove how smart you are at that point, right? You got to get it so it's actionable, and that's exactly what you've got to do with first responders. And I mean, I love the mission of what you're doing because it benefits all of us, right? The military, obviously, huge amount of respect. We need them more than anything. But we see the first responders, in our community every day. My 3-year-old wants to go by the firehouse every single day because he loves fire trucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, these people are neighbors and they're in our community and they make a huge difference. So damn right, I want them, optimized. I want them on their A game, not just physically, but mentally and all the things, and they deserve to be, and then want them to be able to turn it off a little bit when they have to and they go home, So, I mean, I think it's incredible, and it's sad, to your point, that there's, billions of dollars in private equity money being spent on youth sports right now, to tell 7-year-old little Johnny that he's going to be a D1 athlete. But we're not investing that money in the paramedics and the police officers and the firefighters in our community. It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said it very well. And that's a point that we bring up a lot too, when we're trying to, talk to these individuals about taking care of themselves. And a common phrase that gets thrown around a lot is, some version of like, would you want you responding to your family?
Yeah.
This puts it in perspective. Like,
right.
And as a civilian, I tell them, like, I want the most badass officer. I live in this city. I want the most badass officers patrolling my streets. I want the most capable firefighters responding to calls. If you're coming to my house, I want the A team. You know what I mean? Like, I want people that are capable of handling anything that's put in for them. So a more mentally and physically resilient first responder is obviously going to benefit not only the department and the city, but the community that they serve. And that's a huge, huge selling point, is like, we have got to invest in our people, right? There's another, people talk about, like, and I don't know what the average cost of these days of like an engine is, but like, we invest millions of dollars into maintenance of our fleet, right? Mm-hmm. How much money are we investing in the maintenance of our people, right? It's the, people over hardware conversation. And to your point, like data and analytics and all that stuff is fantastic. And it's something I've always said is, like, from a strength coach perspective, is like, if we're both strength coaches, I can write a program, I can give it to you, and you can execute it, and you could probably execute it very well, but we're not going to do it the same, right?
Yeah.
It's, if I send out programs to our people, it's great, but honestly, like, it doesn't have the same effect if I'm not there to coach it in person. So it's kind of a second best or a third best option. But the more that we can put, again, subject matter experts, put good people in these places to support our public safety, workers, like, it's a no-brainer, right? At least it seems that way.
No, 100% it is. And I love the people over hardware. I mean, I had that similar conversation about my kid's school. I did this big fundraiser, and what are you going to spend this money on? And I said, well, we're going to get more computers. I'm like, I know for a fact you guys have a ton of computers. How many more? If you need computers, fine. Yeah. I don't think you really need computers. Like, what about, it's the same thing as, all right, we get this badass fire engine, and we got firefighters who are at 60% because they're just, they're not in shape. They're not in the right frame of mind. They're not prepared. It's like having the best looking school in the county full of teachers that just don't care or don't know what they're doing. It's the same thing. And it has such a ripple effect out in your community of optimizing your people and investing in your people. And granted, there's a lot of like snake oil out there, right? There's a lot of people selling things that are marketed as professional development or whatever it may be. And it's really not that impactful. But when you find one that is, You got to pour into it because like the compounding returns on that are huge.
Yeah. In our space, it's all about resilience. I can't tell you how many resilience courses I've come across that are led by individuals. And it's mostly mental health stuff, and like, not a
Mm-hmm.
knock on it. It's super important. But in the back of my mind, I'm going, that's half the equation. That's half the conversation. You want really resilient people, you got to start holding the line when it comes to having physical fitness standards, or making sure that people are regular in-service training so that they stay on top of their skills. Like that's resilience. That's,
Yep.
of course, there's that mental aspect of it, but like, I feel like there's so much money being dropped into like resilience training, and it's
Well,
like,
resilience is huge, and
what
it's
are we
it's
talking
it's
about?
impactful everywhere, right? It's impactful in life. But if you're just going to keep punching me in the face and I'm going to get knocked down, and resilience just means I keep getting up, that is valuable, right? Because I'm going to keep plugging away. But at some point, maybe I'll need to learn how to block a punch or two, right? Or
Yeah,
or duck and weave, and not just get hit in the nose every time. So I'm with you.
yeah.
I mean, resilience. I'm a huge advocate of it, but you can't. There's the preventative measures that makes resilience a little bit easier, and that's where I think it really clicked for me as we're talking here about what you do and how it can impact that resilience directly. Is if you're in top physical shape, it is easier to be resilient. You're not as tired. Other things that might drag, when you're tired, or you're not eating well, you're not sleeping a lot, everything else is kind of a little bit more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It's like even just dealing with day-to-day life, right? Picking your kids up at school or whatever it may be becomes just a little bit harder because you're not where you need to be. So that preventative measure, that proactive element of like, man, just gets back to standards, right? I have had people talk about this in the military context. The answer is never to lower standards. The
Mm-hmm.
answer is to hold the line on what the standards are and hopefully elevate them. And if you can't find enough people that meet those standards, that's when you have a problem. So key performance code in, right? And say, well, here's some people, you get B players, you need a team full of A players. You can't afford to have a B player, on a fire squad or on a police force. You need A players. So let's turn your B's into A's, and then hopefully you don't have any C's on your team. Hopefully it's A's and B's.
Yeah, or so, one day you're kind of a C player, and the next day you're an A player. Like, but if you
Yeah.
have a crew that's well rounded, and people can, kind of pick up the slack here and there, and like that's huge. But yeah, I think it's, yeah, that's kind of the big thing, and I think it is for a lot of these departments is just the hard part for them. It seems to be making that initial leap of faith, so
Mm-hmm.
to speak, or that investment. But in my experience, at least so far, and maybe knock on wood a little bit, but every department that we have worked with has come back around. We have not, there's been no one and dones, right? Like,
Yeah.
scary, yes. Going to have a cost to it, absolutely. It's a business. We have to pay our coaches, right? But once we get in, they see the return on investment. They see what we deliver, and they go, "Oh man, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, I wish we would have done this sooner." I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's hopefully the goal nationwide, not just for Performance Code or any other company, but for first responders as a whole. Is like, let's push this. Let's do better for them.
Yeah. Amen. It's human nature. People are reluctant to invest in things that they can't quantify or see an immediate return on. Right? It's easy to say, "Hey, look at the shiny new fire engine we have." It's like
Yeah,
it's a
look what we
little bit harder to.
did.
Yeah, look, prove it. Here's proof and concept. But like, yeah, it gets back to sales, I suppose, right? You got to sell them on the concept, which is pretty straightforward in my mind. But there's a little bit of a leap of faith that people are going to say,
Mhm.
again, invest in our people over our hardware. I love that. I'm going to steal that. But it makes all the sense in the world to me. Last question, I'm going to let you go. But what is, we've talked a lot about you serving others, right? Being there for other people, both in your baseball days and now. And so I made this point several times in the conversation, but you've got to be optimized in order to serve others, right? To be at your best. So like, what's your approach to that? How do you recharge? How do you recover? How do you practice resilience? How do you keep yourself optimized to go do what you do?
Yeah, for me personally, I mean, I love training myself, working out, exercising. Obviously that kind of goes hand in hand with the profession that I have. But for me, it's a really fun way to explore different techniques or methodologies or things that I'm, reading or learning up on before I take it to the people that I'm working with, if it's applicable or not. So I love trying new things. I love training myself. It really is a mental reset for me. If I'm in a pissy mood and my wife is like, go take a walk, I'm probably resilient to it, but I know she's right. Um, something as simple as that. I also uh, I play drums, or at least I'm a wannabe drummer. So that for me, there's something about when like all four limbs are kind of doing different things. Like I don't know how to explain it other than it's almost like an not out of body experience, but like I can't
Little
think
flow
about,
state. Yeah.
yeah, a flow state. I can't think about anything else because you're so locked into doing those different things. And so for me, like even just 30, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or if I'm lucky enough to get an hour of practice time in, I feel almost like euphoric coming out of that. So like, I guess
Yeah.
music therapy, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, and then
Plus you get to
lately,
bang on some stuff, right?
yeah, well, it's an electric drum set, so I don't piss off the neighbors. But
Okay.
someday I'll get back to buying an acoustic set. But the other thing for me that I've really been working on lately is just being really, really mindful of my screen time when I'm at home. It's like almost going back to, I'm a millennial. I grew up. I remember when, you know, cell phones came out, when dial up internet, like I remember a time before that. And I've just recently, especially with, I've got two young kids, like I don't want their perception of me to be the guy like this all the
Hmm.
time. And so I've been trying to make a cognizant effort that when I get home, or at least if I get home before them, whatever, when the family is in the house, I put my phone away up in my room on the charger in a different room. And I'm not always great at it. Sometimes I'm just bored, but it's amazing how many times like I just find myself like reaching for it. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? I didn't have anything in mind that I was checking. There was no tone. There was no notification. It was just like it was this habit,
Reflex.
and so I'm
Yeah.
almost trying to take myself back to like beta mode where I'm less influenced by that. And so that those three things have really at least currently what I'm really working on to kind of re refresh, make sure I'm taking care of myself so that I can take care of my family and take care of the people that I work with.
Yeah, man. The screen time thing is real. I mean, it's hard. You've got to be very disciplined and intentional about. And I struggle with it too. I have the same exact view on it, and I'm not always great at it because there's a lot of really smart people that are uh, building things to capture your attention at every possible second.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had that same thing where you're like, you just find yourself reaching for your phone. You're like, why? I don't even know why I'm doing this. I have nothing that I even want to look for, but I'm just grabbing it and I'm going to open it and I'm going to just start scrolling on something. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, the mindfulness thing is it's hard. It's hard today. And, we're talking about Christmas gifts for my kids and all this other stuff. People are like, hey, you're going to get your kid a phone? I'm like, I would rather get them a tin can with a string,
Yeah.
and like, it's just, you reach a point where you need to be able to get in touch with your kids, right? When they get a little bit older, but there's just there's so much downside to being connected at this point that, and I hear you loud and clear on that. That's all I'll
Yeah.
say.
I am not looking forward to those conversations. We're not there yet. We're still a few years off, but yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, can I say never? Can I
Yeah, I know.
prevent?
I know. Let's hope that I actually do think that there's going to be this movement of parents to kind of go off the grid a little bit and get them
Yeah.
decoupled from technology to some extent. I mean, you're never going to totally separate it, but that's the only way it happens. I think is it starts in the phone. And it starts at home, right? Like, so your example of putting your phone up in the other room, like that's a small signal, but it's an important one that they realize that, if mom and dad are always just staring at a screen, like, of course, that's all they're going to do. Right? Kids are inclined to do that anyway. I mean, I played video games growing up as a kid. The difference was I didn't have it accessible 24/7, and there wasn't all these outside influences. It was like I could load my Tecmo Bowl and go play, Bo Jackson and run around for a couple hours. And that was kind of the end of it. Yeah. But it's just a different world now. So I'll get off my soapbox.
No, I mean, not to drag it out. I was having a fun conversation with one of our fire lieutenants, and I said, because we were talking about this kind of thing, and I was like, here's a challenge. Sit down, watch a football game, whatever your sport of choice is, and don't check your phone for the entire game. So when the commercial break comes on and you want to grab your phone, you can't do it. And just see how, like, it really, I did it once, and it was like, wow, how much
tweaking.
I wanted to go grab that thing. And I was like, and then now again, I'm not perfect, but like, as I'm getting more into it, like, I feel so much better when I've gone 3-4 hours and I haven't even touched the thing. And it's like, kind of that like, whoa moment where you're like, this was like when we were growing up. Like, anyway, so fun challenge for you. Especially
I'll take it. I'll take it coming up this weekend with some of the college football games. I'm gonna check my phone. I love it. Mike, this is great, man. I appreciate you sharing. I love what you're doing at Performance Code. I hope it spreads like wildfire, not just in Denver, but all over the country. I think it's hugely impactful, and would love to see this just be in every city in America, because I think it's stupid if we don't invest in our people and those folks in particular.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for having me.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening to this episode of the No One Is Watching podcast. If you'd like to support the show, hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and share it with your friends. If you're interested in similar content focused on leadership, culture, and high performance, check out nooneiswatching.com. Your time is valuable, so I appreciate you spending some of it with me today. See you next time.